Camera. Hello, my name is Connor Quinlan, and in this review I'm going to talk about how to use the autofocus modes on your Nikon digital SLR. Now of course here I have the Nikon D300, so it's not going to be the same as every other Nikon digital camera, but the concepts are essentially the same. What I'm going to do in this review is go over the three different functions of the autofocus right here. Now this camera has a 51-point autofocus system, and of course in other digital cameras it'll be a little bit different. For example, the Nikon D90 has an 11-point autofocus system. Basically what that means is that on this camera, for instance the Nikon D300 has 51 points, that means, as you can see here, that's one autofocus point. There's a second one, third one, fourth one, and so on and so forth, until there's a total of 51 autofocus points in this area that you can see here. Now, what is the function of these three different things here? Well, the first one, which is just a white rectangle up here, is full autofocus mode. And as you can see, the point on the screen completely disappeared. And the reason it does that is because now it's going to actually use all the points in this frame to help autofocus on an image. Now, full autofocus mode, like you see here, is going to be a little bit slower because it's using all 51 points to try to focus on a specific object. The best time to use full autofocus mode is for still life imaging. A good example of that would be landscape photography, where you're going to be pretty much standing still or using a tripod and you have a lot of time to autofocus and you want the whole frame to kind of be in focus here. The next mode I'm going to talk about is a single point mode, and as you can see the autofocus mode or point popped up again right here. Basically what that is it's exactly how it sounds. It focuses only on this single point wherever I want it to focus. So I can either focus it up here, you can hear the beep, or over here on this doorknob, or over here on the leg of this chair. Now as you can hear from the camera itself, when it beeped, it was a lot faster than when the autofocus version was going. And the reason it's a lot faster is because it doesn't have to worry about all 51 other points. So using the single point autofocus mode makes the focusing a lot faster in the camera. However, even though it is a lot faster, it's not a mode that I would recommend using because you're only using one point of autofocus here. It's really difficult to get everything else in focus. For example, if you're taking a picture of a subject that's moving, like for sports or football or something like that, and you're only using one point to focus on that person, and he's moving around, if he moves away from the autofocus point, you could end up focusing on the background instead of the person that you want to focus on. So it's not a mode that I would recommend. However, to solve that problem, you can actually use dynamic AF mode, which is essentially the same as single point mode in the fact that you're using a point here to focus, but the difference between those two is that points around this focus point are also helping focus as well. So if you're trying to track a football player once again and he moves away from this sensor, it'll keep autofocusing on him because the points around this point are helping autofocus as well. So if your subject strays away from this point, it'll still keep that subject in focus as long as he doesn't stray away too far. And of course you can change the amount of helper focus points around your central focus point in the menu. And we're going to go to the menu right now, go to autofocus. And as you can see here in dynamic AF area, you've got a couple different choices. You can either have 9 points around the central point help you autofocus, 21 points, or all the points, 51 points in this case. I tend to use the 21 point mostly because it helps keep the subject that I'm trying to take a picture of in focus if he strays a little far away from the central focus point, but it also doesn't take too long for the camera to focus on the subject either. Remember, the more focus points you're using on your image, the slower the autofocus is going to be. And that's essentially everything you need to know about these three in the back. And like I said, the dynamic AF mode is good for action, wildlife, and sports photography, so that the autofocus is very fast, yet if they stray away from the central point, it'll still keep that subject in focus as long as the subject doesn't stray too far away. Now I'm going to talk about the different autofocus modes the camera has to offer, which are located along the side here. As you can see, there are three of them, the M, S, and the C mode. The M mode is pretty self-explanatory. It means manual mode. which means that there is no autofocus. So you have to use your manual focus ring on your lens in order to focus. The other two modes are autofocus mode, and the first is the S mode, which basically means that when you press down the shutter, right here, you'll hear it beep like you just heard right there. And when it beeps, it stops autofocusing even if I take my hand away from the front, and it stays in focus. So in order to refocus, I would have to take my finger off the shutter, push it down again, and then it'll beep again. Now this mode is good for still life photography like landscape or nature photography. C mode, however, does just the opposite. If you press it down, it'll continue to autofocus, and it won't make that beep at all. So this way you won't have to take your finger off the shutter in order to take another picture. You can hold it down and it will continue to autofocus. And of course, since it continues to autofocus, this mode is good for things like sports, wildlife, and action photography, because as the subject moves, it moves closer and further away from you, therefore it needs to keep focusing. Last thing I want to go over is this button right here, which is on pretty much every Nikon lens. The M mode, just like the M mode here, means manual, so you're going to have to manual focus your lens in order to use that. And then this mode means autofocus mode, so you're able to autofocus with the lens. And that is how the autofocus system works on most Nikon digital SLRs.